Hey guys, Chris from Provo Beast Audio Installation, and today we're doing a radio install in this 2013 Honda Civic. In this install, we're going to show you how to remove the factory radio, head to the bench, wire up the new radio, install the new radio in the dash kit, and reassemble everything in the factory location. Let's get started. Now here we are in the car. You'll notice here we have the navigation version of the Civic. If you have the non-nav, parts will differ just so slightly. One of the biggest differences that you'll notice in your install, if you have a factory backup camera, the camera displays on the screen and not on your heads-up display up here in the dash. And so that's really some of the biggest differences here. So we'll list in the description different variations of parts based on the Civic that you have. First thing that we're going to do to get started is to get this popped on out. We're going to have to pop out this lower dash pocket here. The reason that we need to do so is there's two screws up underneath holding this whole piece together in a bracket. And what these pieces look like are these little screws. These are little 7mm screws that you need to pull out. They are keyed for a Phillips head, but rather than potentially stripping them out, I'd actually put a socket on these and remove these. Now the first thing that we need to do is actually pull this back. You have a little shift lock override here. So if you put a little flathead in there and open up this little panel, what this is going to do is open up a spot where you push the button down and you can pull the shifter all the way back without the need of putting the key in the ignition. Make sure your emergency brake is on so the car doesn't roll on you. Now next here, when you open up this little panel, you're going to feel there's two Phillips screws there. We're going to go ahead and remove those screws. Okay, once you've removed those two screws in the pocket, close it again, grab the bottom, and just kind of give it a nice little tug. That should come on out here. Set that off to the side. Now next you're going to fill these two screws up underneath. So in order to get a socket on there, you want to get a short stubby one. Now after those two screws up underneath have been removed, you're going to have two screws here at the bottom of the radio. What I like to do is you can actually fill the radio from the back and push it out like that, so you don't risk like scratching the outside bezel. It just comes on out. The harnesses are kind of short, so you don't have much length to play with. What you're going to want to do is go ahead and disconnect all these harnesses. Most of them you push the pin down and the harness slides right on out. Go ahead and remove all the harnesses, even from the HVAC controls up underneath, and the radio will come free. Okay, there we go. Stereo's out. Left with all our harnesses here. Let's head over to the bench and show you what parts we need to throw in our new Pioneer aftermarket radio. Provo Beast Audio Installation Channel is sponsored by NVX and Sonic Electronics. Get 10% off all speakers, amplifiers, wiring kits, and more with coupon code PBAI at NVX. Also get 5% off all car audio components at Sonic Electronics with coupon code ProvoBeast. Alright, so some of the parts that we're going to need to make this install work. We have our wiring kit. We're going with the Radio Pro 4 by Pack Audio. It's the RP4-HD11. This retains our steering wheel controls. We have an antenna adapter. We're using the Metra 40-HD11 as well. And then the Pioneer radio that we're going to go with here is the AVH W4500 NEX with wireless Apple Carplay and Android Auto. The Civics, you can't really retain your factory aux jack because it's a circuited aux, so it's not just a direct pass-through, unfortunately. What you're going to need is some sort of alternative, and we picked up this aux USB flash mount adapter, which we'll put in the power socket's place. Finally here, the dash kit on our specific, because we have the navigation, we're going with this Scosche HA1718B dash kit. This does single and double DIN, but again, if you don't have navigation, your dash kit will vary slightly, so again, check the description of the video. Alright, so what we're going to do is go ahead and wire up our wiring harness here. Now, Be sure to read your instructions thoroughly here. It always asks you to set your radio here on the module first. When you wire this up, if you have the factory amplified system, you'll need a radio that has RCA pre-outs, and these plug in rather than wiring up speaker wires. Now, if you don't have the premium audio, PAC instructs you to cut these off and then wire in your speaker wires from your radio directly to these leads. We don't have the factory premium system. We're going to cut these off and we're going to wire our speaker wires directly into these colors, as well as all other colors as needed according to our instructions. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so we have prepped our harness. We have our harness from our aftermarket radio, our Pioneer specifically, and our PAC audio harness adapter. Now, most of these wires are going to go color for color, but you'll notice, we'll show you here in a second, there's some special ones that they don't really match the industry standard. Our power wire here, power and ground, is yellow and black. Those are pretty standard, same with our speaker wires. What we'll do is strip both ends like we've done here, and then we went ahead and twisted them together so it's metal on metal. And then we have a hot soldering iron ready to go. And what we like to do is just kind of put that back in there to get that nice and warm. Gets us a nice solid connection. Now, before we've done that, we've put all our heat shrink tubing on, so once our connection's cool, we can actually just slide that up and over and use a heat gun to shrink those tubes down. So we're going to continue matching our colors up here for our speaker wire. And then once we get those done and get to our special ones, we'll show you where those go specifically. Okay, so we went ahead and finished our wiring harness, most of the main connections, except for the special ones that we told you about. We just matched color for color and essentially soldered each color up. Our antenna requires a little bit of power so it can trigger the antenna amplifier, and that's why we hooked it into our blue as well, our blue-white. Light green is our parking brake, and we added a bypass for Pioneers. We actually have a helpful video on the channel of how these actually work and how to use them and wire them in. We got our ground all hooked up as well. Orange, white is illumination, that one's straightforward. Red is accessory, and then obviously yellow is power. So those are all done. What we have left here So we'll make those final connections and then move the heat shrink up and over our solder. Now, before we button everything up, if you have the navigation system, this tip here only applies to you. According to PAC, you actually need to wire in 2 jumpers in your CAN bus wires here, and it's the pink and pink with the black stripe. But these 2 wires need to be jumped into 2 other wires in the other 16-pin harness in the car, to which PAC doesn't supply a connector to. You have to manually wire it in. So once we get into the car, we will show you where these need to go. And again, this is only if you have the navigation system. If you don't have the factory nav, you don't have to worry about this part. Now, finally here, this long white-green wire, in case you have the Bluetooth buttons on your steering wheel, most of your main steering wheel controls go through the main harness, except for those extra 3 buttons, the pickup, the hang up, and the voice recognition button. We have to tap into a harness in the steering column and connect this wire to make those buttons work. So we'll show you what that looks like here later on. We added an extra power and ground here off our main harness, because this power and ground, we're going to power up our factory OEM camera, and we'll show you what that looks like in the car. We added our extra red and the black to the red and black in our main harness here, just so we can integrate our aftermarket radio to the OEM camera. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and tape up our 2 connections here, wrap up our harness so it looks nice. Okay, so we went ahead and finished up taping up our harness. These two ends plug into the car. These are our special 2 data bus connections that we'll need to wire in manually. This wire, in order to retain the 3 extra buttons on the steering wheel, we'll have to tap into the steering column to run this all the way there. This end plugs into the WR input on the back of the radio for steering wheel controls. This end plugs into the Motorola AM/FM antenna input on the back of the radio. And then this is our main wiring harness connection to power the radio and our speaker wires. And remember, we wired just another power and ground off because we have a built-in relay here just to power the OEM camera so it boots up when the key is on. So we're going to wire that in as well. Let's start prepping our new radio and getting it installed within the dash kit. We pulled apart our Scotch bag here, and it comes with, you have to be kind of careful with it, the actual trim piece that goes up and around the radio. Since rather than replacing the whole dash bezel, all we're doing is replacing a portion of it. So as we pull this out, try not to scratch it, we have that piece that'll fit in that factory location there. Comes with the brackets here. It actually came with metal brackets that will help bolt up to the factory bezel. There we are. Pretty sweet. Pretty straightforward kit too. Now again, remember, if you don't have the navigation unit, the dash kit actually replaces this whole piece, so you'd have to swap out all these individual parts into the new kit. Now just one quick note here, since we have the radio out and everything pulled apart, this literally just has a couple of clips and it comes on out. And since there's already another power socket inside the center console and the armrest, what we're going to do is actually put this in its place so you can easily access the USB and aux right beneath the radio. Now, of course, this is no longer used, and if you want, you can actually go ahead and pop that out or modify this, or do something else with it. There's also plenty of space if you want to mount something else on your own, but we pop this out. We're going to go ahead and pop the socket out and then put this in its place, and then this will plug into the back of the radio, easily relocating our aux and USB input to a more convenient location. Okay, got all our harnesses all connected here. We just need to plug in our antenna here. All right, so some just quick information. If you have the factory backup camera and it's been integrated into your screen and you want to retain that, here's a little harness it's a 7-pin harness that goes with it. And I'm going to walk you through what wires do what in this harness. Starting from the right on my hand, our camera's right. Green here is your camera power, your factory OEM camera power positive. And then to the left of that, pin number 2 is that kind of that white, and that's power negative. Generally, it takes 7 to 8 volts to power it, but most forums and people have tested it that it actually can take 12 volts okay. If you're worried about giving it 12 volts, there are voltage reducers online, step down reducers that can take 12 volts and drop it down to 8, 7, or 6 volts depending on your application. So just keep that in mind. The next two, pin 4 and pin 5. Pin 4 is red. Now you may want to think that's positive, but it's not. It's actually negative. So we tied our video signal negative to our RCA to that, and then to the right of that is black, which is actually positive. It's so backwards, but it is. it's positive, and that'll be our RCA positive for the signal for our camera. Now we have wired in an RCA into that. Hooked up our power to our OEM backup camera from our aftermarket harness. Now, let's jump back to the jumpers. Remember these guys back on the bench? Well, the other end is here. And again, I'll do a little screenshot here from PAC's instructions, but they tell you which ones to tap into. And on this 16-pin harness that nothing connects into, the two ones here on the end, these two top pins, one's kind of a brown, the other one's a blue. Those two are the ones that we need to tap our two wires into. And don't use butt connectors. Best case scenario, you solder into it. Or, I mean, if you don't want to solder, at least do wire and wire and use crimp caps, which we're going to do here, and we'll show you how to do that. We already soldered into this end here. We ran that white green wire down, and it's just kind of hanging out down there because we got to take apart this steering wheel cover around the column, so we can tap into to get these buttons down here integrated with the rest of them. And we also ran a Bluetooth mic just down the A-pillar, up and underneath, then out here as well. And we'll plug that into the back of the radio. Got these all taken care of, wire on wire, because we don't want any resistance there. And then the last wire we'll need to connect is in the steering column, but we'll wait till that is done later. This is all good to go at this point. Let's go ahead and get the radio into the dash, hooked up with all our harnesses here, and we'll start testing. Okay, so we got the radio in. We got our lower pocket all in. That aux USB little mod looks awesome. We still need to put this in, but we left our PAC module hanging out so we can program steering wheel controls. Now, if you want to retain these buttons down below to get to the steering column, which we've already pulled apart, I'll show you how we did that. So to get the steering wheel column off, you go ahead and put in a little flathead screwdriver there, pop that up, and it'll separate all the way back. Same thing with the other side. The flat screwdriver to pop that on up. So this is just kind of free. Then you'll remove those two screws, both sides there. Once those are two removed, we'll show you the one on the bottom. They go right there, little Phillips. And then it separates. And then the wire we're looking at is in this harness. And it's blue for Civics. It's pin number 3. And then in the diagram that PAC shows us, that's what it looks like. And from here, we just separated the insulation a little bit and then put our wire there, and then we're gonna go ahead and solder onto that, tape it up, and then when we're done, we can reassemble our steering column. Okay, good to go. We're all done here. Got everything all reassembled, steering columns back in, got everything reprogrammed based on our instructions here. So let's go ahead and check out the backup camera integration now, since it's all done. Reverse. Awesome. Take it back out of reverse. Back to our other source. Radio looks great. We just need to wipe everything down here. Aux and USB input look awesome. And, that's about it. If you have any questions about what we did here, go ahead and post a comment below. Thanks, guys, for watching, and we will see you in the next video.